Right, we're now
Lights on
recording.
now.
Yep.
Yep, you're recording.
Okay. Okay, so there's 22 of us. Excellent. So let me introduce Andy. There he is. You keep on moving around my screen. So Andy Westlake. Now, some of you are very familiar with him, some less familiar, but I think I've known you. I've known you around 10 years, haven't I? From just a couple of years before you went to AP.
Yeah, about that.
So you joined DPReview to test lenses in 2007.
That's right.
I can't believe it's that far ago, but
long time ago.
Yes. And then once you were established there, you started reviewing cameras as well as lenses. And in 2014, you moved to AP after the DPReview team relocated to the States. And yes. I think you were working remotely for a while with the DPReview team, but that was a rather lonely existence, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I was working in London for about 3 years with the rest of the team in Seattle. And for anyone who doesn't really kind of know how that works, Seattle is 8 hours behind the UK. So when I went into work, I'd be sitting there doing a full day's work, and just at the point that I thought, oh, it's about time to go home, they'd all come online and bombard me with questions, and then maybe have telephone meetings that would last what seemed like forever. So it was an interesting way of working.
Yes, I can remember your frustration at the time. Yes. Anyway, basically the format is we'll probably dispense with introducing each other because it'll take for ages, and we have at least 40 minutes. We might be able to go a bit longer if everyone is still awake by then. But oh, hang on, there's some more to admit. Here we go. I've got to keep an eye on the participants list. Okay. Hello, everyone.
Hi. Hello.
Right. Okay, and Andy's here with us, and we're just about to start. And so I've just done a quick intro regarding Andy's background, but it's basically going to be Q&A. So I'll probably start things going, and if you had anything to say, just chip in, and we'll see how it goes as we go. I think it's fair to say that Andy is very technical. He can answer lots of technical questions if you want, or you can be a bit more general and ask him some questions about how he regards the kit in comparison to others. He's a regular user of an OM-D E-M5 Mark II. Is that right, Andy?
Yeah, that's it's my personal most used camera.
There you go.
Stuff.
And you've got quite an interesting selection of lenses as well from various manufacturers.
Yeah, it's got a massive array of lenses.
Yeah, and on top of that, he's also a full frame user. He uses Sony Alpha 7. So if you'd like some honest and down to earth insights into how full frame compares, by all means. It's always been my policy that all these formats are relevant. It's just a matter of who they're relevant to and what strengths and weaknesses are. Every format has a strength and weakness. So who would like to start? Who's got a burning question? Okay, yes. John.
A question about flash. And I use an EM1 Mark I and a Mark II. With the Mark I, I get access to fully automatic flash with an FL50R or an FL36. But on the EM1 Mark II, that option doesn't seem to be there. I'm just puzzled why.
That's a very good question. And one of the problems with this sort of thing is it's very difficult to diagnose anything like that without having the camera.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I was going to say, maybe we can make a record of that and come back to you.
Sure.
yeah, definitely that's one to. And I don't have either of those cameras to hand either, so it's the sort of things that can get in the way. If you have set a manual flash output power on one of the cameras, that might prevent it from going back to auto. That's the sort of thing that sticks out as a possibility, but it's very difficult to know, really.
I mean, the option doesn't even appear. It's not like it's there but greyed out. It's just not there at all. It's just peculiar. Not quite sure why.
I've got my Mark II here. I mean, I can have a quick look, I suppose. What are we looking for?
The like TTL auto flash, like they used to have on the OM2Ns and things like that years ago. The camera will control the flash and switch it off as soon as it's got enough light. That option is there in the E1, E3, E5, EM1 Mark 1. Just doesn't seem to be available in the 2. You get other things. You get second curtain sync and things like that. You just don't get the fully auto where the camera is actually controlling the flash output. Doesn't seem to appear. I'm just wondering because as the system moves on, the E-system stuff tends to get forgotten, and it might well be available with the later FL900s and things like that. But I haven't got one of those, so I can't tell.
Okay, let's make a note of that, and I'll certainly find an answer for you one way or another. Andy might be able to do the same and let me know.
Can I launch in with a more general question?
Yes.
So you've said in the intro that Andy's go-to camera is the EM5. Obviously, you have access to a lot of stuff. So I'm going to ask a more general question. What particularly draws you to that being the kit that you use, and and why is that your go-to device these days?
So I'd say there's three things about the EM5. Size, be small and light, but without being a simple entry-level camera. It's a proper camera, but it's small. And there aren't very many of those around, to be honest. The in-body stabilization is a massive factor because you don't necessarily have to wander around with a tripod all the time. And the Olympus color output, which means that you can basically say, if I want to use JPEGs, and a lot of the time you might well do, a lot of the time I want to use JPEGs, then they're there and they'll look great. And you won't get that necessarily with every other brand. If you go to Sony, slightly older Sony cameras, your colors will be all over the shop. The auto white balance is often way off. And generally you can camera raw conversion, so you're kind of going, I can't use these files without having to do a lot of work with them. With Olympus, straight out the camera, go for it. And of course, lenses as well. The lens system is fantastic. The Pro lenses are as good as anything you'll get from any other system. You can also throw on nice small primes like the 45 1.8. Sigma 56 1.4 is brilliant. So it's kind of all these things that add up.
Let me just ask.
Glad to hear that. Like you say, but particularly, I guess most of us here are using mostly Olympus because that's what we've got, and to hear that from somebody who's got access to a lot more stuff is quite useful, quite interesting. Somebody else was going to speak.
Yeah, I was just going to say I've got a slightly sort of other sort of general question, which is, so I've been shooting Olympus for a long time, and I mostly shoot landscapes. Am I crazy?
I do.
Oh, come on, let's do something provocative.
You're probably as crazy as I am when I'm shooting wildlife with it.
I mean, wildlife Olympus is a really good idea because you've got the 300 f4 and the 40-150 f2.8, and the EM1 is an incredible camera for wildlife. But going back to landscapes, again, you kind of have this thing where you are trading off image quality, if you like, against portability. And for landscapes, you might be doing quite a lot of wandering around with a load of stuff. You can downsize everything. You can downsize your tripod, you can downsize your filters, you're carrying less stuff. You've got a weatherproof camera that you can use with gloves, usually. So you have a system that works really well. Again, your image quality is not defined by the sensor, it's defined by the sensor and the lenses. And you can put fantastic small lenses. So it just depends on how you think about whether what matters to you is stuff like noise and dynamic range, or being able to carry around a broad range of focal length without breaking your back. And then you have specific lenses like the 60mm macro, which don't have anything like anywhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can certainly sort of resonate with lots of things you said there. The only thing which I sometimes miss with Micro Four Thirds is more DR. On the other hand, I often think in typical landscape scenes, there's more DR than even a so-called full-frame camera would manage. So maybe I need to use techniques to get what I need rather than searching for some sort of non-achievable sensor performance.
Yeah. I mean, there is tricks you can do. So if you use any of the multi-shot modes, depending on how fluid things are in front of you, you can get more DR out of multi-shot because high-res files are cleaner as well as more detailed. But with a lot of landscapes, you might have artifacts from movement that you just won't be able to live with. This is an area where the EM1 Mark has improved, I think, and the EM1X, where you don't get the nasty kind of grid-like stuff that you used to get with the EM5 Mark II when that first introduced multi-shot. Now you can get actually, very clean, high-res and more dynamic range.
Mm-hmm.
But also you can just bracket your exposures on a tripod if that's what you want to do. Or go back to using grad filters. Grad filters have a space.
I have to say that Paul's landscape shots don't betray any need for anything. They're excellent, and I think that's the final judgment of things. Because if you can get the quality that you're happy with out of it, then that's it. In the end, I think Paul as a photographer gets extremely good results, and there's the law of diminishing return, etc. So yeah,
absolutely. The results are all that matter, and it shouldn't be the results when you stare at pixels on screen. It should be results when you look at your pictures as a whole.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are certainly things which Olympus cameras give you, particularly image stabilization and the lenses, which actually count for a lot. It's they can make up for an improved sense with other camera systems.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, who's next?
Have you got any tips on using the 60mm macro? Because that's a fairly new lens that I've got.
So
get used to it.
It depends a little bit on the camera you've got as well.
I'm using the EM1 Mark II.
So you'll be able to use focus stacking. So experiment with that. It's quite hard work because you've got these numbers in the menu. You have no idea what they mean. Should I use interval 2 or interval 5? I don't know. But if you can kind of stick with it and work with it, what you will find is that the great thing about using focus stacking is you can expand your depth of field without de-blurring your background. So that's a really nice thing to play with. I mean, really, to me, it's a very well behaved lens. You can shoot it wide open, you'll get nice results, really nice results. There's an Olympus ambassador, name of Gareth, someone or other, who shoots insects, and he does like handheld focus stacking on the EM1X, which just really shouldn't work, and gets amazing results. So I think it's with all these things, just play with it, try it, get stuff in your living room and stack it up and see what you have to do to get the depth of field you want or the background blur you want. Always with macro, it's as much about looking at what's behind the subject as what you're pointing at.
Yeah, I've tried a little bit with the focus stacking, and I've found varying results with it. I quite often get sort of a haloing effect, which I don't particularly want.
Yeah, and that's kind of an occupational hazard, and I think maybe the processing on the newer cameras might have improved on that. The only other thing is basically take all those shots out of camera and then put them together in some software that's expressly designed for the purpose.
Yeah.
That can be a world of pain as well.
Can I just say, earlier on I heard you say that the 60mm macro was a kind of unique lens. Why did you say that?
Because you get extreme macro abilities. You're getting effectively 2-to-1 because it's 1-to-1 macro on a small sensor. And it's tiny and it's light and it's weather sealed. And if you look for all of those attributes, particularly lightweight, proper macro, weather sealed in any other system, you'll struggle to find it.
Okay, great. Okay, who would like to ask another question?
It's Paul Graver here from Guildford. Can you hear me
Paul.
okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hi. I want to pick up on some, I think it was Joanna who made the point, was she crazy to use the Olympus system for wildlife? I think the answer is far from it. And I think one of the really interesting things about the EM1X, it may not have been a huge success commercially, but what it has done is persuaded quite a number of top wildlife photographers to switch to Olympus. And I'm thinking of people like Andy Rouse, David Tippling. There's a list of 4 or 5 big name bird and wildlife photographers who've switched to Olympus. And it's not about the body size, it's about the lens size. And Andy, you already mentioned the 300mm. You know, I can carry that around all day without finding it a burden and handhold it for everything I do. It's a cracking lens, and I think the big difference is about lenses now, not bodies.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And also, just to add on to that, you can stick a teleconverter on it, 1.4 times converter, you're getting 840 equivalent, and it's totally hand-holdable. Now, you know, try and do that with almost anything else, you will really struggle.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, I was recently in Uganda with some friends. They were using a Nikon, I think it was a D7100 with a 200 to 400?
500.
200 to 500,
yeah,
maybe.
something like that. I was using the Panasonic 100 to 400 on my EM1 Mark II. And, you know, the amount of weight that they were lugging around with that setup was just not a place that I would want to go to.
And
I don't know if anyone is interested.
It's so much more nimble. It's so much more nimble drawing a bead on a bird or something coming suddenly into view, isn't it?
It is, but I think it still falls down with the autofocus with birds in flight. I don't find it is. I don't find that I'm getting that sort of responsiveness that they perhaps seem to be with those sort of situations. Like, for example, a shoebill just decided to come straight towards us, and I didn't get it. Well, I didn't even try and get the shot, to be honest, because I knew my camera wasn't going to be fast enough. But they both managed to get some nice, you know, full-on flying towards you sort of images. But when you're sort of comparing what I've got with what they've got, they're quite similar images to be honest, I'm finding maybe my output is a little bit softer but cleaner than the way that they've maybe processed their files. I don't know if anyone's interested, but we always put up trip reports of these sort of wildlife trips, so you can actually compare my shots with the ones that they've put up. If anyone's interested, I'll post a link.
Yeah, post a link. That'd be great.
That would be really
Andy,
interesting. Yeah.
Is the EM1X a big improvement in the autofocus area?
Compared to the EM1 Mark II, I think it was pretty significant. And the EM1 Mark III is fantastic as well. I mean, there's been an element with the EM1 Mark III of people looking at it and saying, all the same specs, same camera. It isn't.
No, it isn't.
It really is very, very much better.
In what way, Andy? I mean, I've obviously read all the reviews about the EM1 Mark III. I mean, it sounds like what you're saying, it goes beyond the sort of headlines, does it?
So because you've got a new processor inside, you can do all this stuff with live ND and handheld live high res. And this is quite significant because you can just do more stuff without needing a tripod. You need to bear in mind that handheld high res is not the same thing as multi-shot. The tripod one is a completely different thing, but it's still a good thing to have. The autofocusing is definitely improved, and things like the eye focusing for portraits is a big improvement. It can work in ludicrously low light with subjects you can't even really see in the viewfinder what's going on. It understands. So I think the new processor in the EM1 Mark III makes a really big difference. It isn't always reflected in the specifications. It's one of those things where if you've got an EM1 Mark II and you're thinking, not sure this is working perfectly, it would be worth getting hold of one to see whether it's better. If you can borrow one, hire one, whatever, which where places like Hire a Camera are really worthwhile because you could just hire one for a week.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe Ian will put one on his hire service.
Oh well, yeah.
That would be good.
The hire service is on a sabbatical at the moment because of various things which I may have explained before. But yeah, the financial situation with the pandemic is not helping that either. So, but anyway, who would like to ask another question?
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Blue by you by my nick. I'm Henry actually.
Yeah,
okay,
from Malaysia.
Yes, from Malaysia. I've got the EM1 Mark III, and I noticed that the ISO button, when I select the ISO button, I don't get the white balance on the top anymore, like I have with my EM1 Mark II.
Yeah.
That's missing. Is there any way that we can ask Olympus? Because like now, I'll have to sacrifice another button just for the white balance.
No, yes, that is one of the things that we've done. I'm wondering whether there's a possibility of putting the two together on a custom thing.
No.
But again, without you can't work out a way of doing it.
No, you have to sacrifice another button just for it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll just have a look at mine. Hang on.
Mark's gone. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's one of those ones where it's kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back in a way, what they've done. They've redesigned all of those external controls to make the camera look more like people expect it to, kind of the wider audience of cameras. You've now got ISO and exposure compensation sitting on the camera, really obvious to find for people who use Nikon, Canon, whatever. but losing that particular kind of ISO plus white balance on one button is a bit annoying.
Because I find that when it's on the button, I have got maybe the front dial is for ISO, the back dial is for white balance, and straight away I've got that, you know. So now I've got to do something else just to get there.
No,
a little bit annoying.
Is there a question of, can you do it with, no, you can't do it with multifunction. So I've got an EM5 Mark III here.
EM5 Mark III seems to have the same problem. I think they started with the EM5 Mark III.
Yeah, because they decided to do this thing of putting exposure compensation and ISO on the outside. And you can't do that dual control on a button because that's just what they've decided.
Okay, well that's interesting. I don't think we can resolve that right now. But once again, thanks for raising that, and I'll add that to the list of things to investigate. And I have actually, I can let you know that we have Michael Gutman coming hopefully next week. He's the product manager for system cameras in Olympus Europe. So I haven't had a definite yes, but he's very willing. He's just got to check his calendar. So I'm hoping that we can get him on, and he would be able to answer some of these things and perhaps feed back to Japan as well.
Yeah, he is the man for that. He is the man in Europe for feeding stuff back to Japan.
Yeah. Okay, so
Ian.
Yeah.
Just it's Mark here.
Yeah, I can see Mark.
Yeah, great. Now, the way I've got round that, I've got a 2 and a 3, and in fact, I remapped my ISO button and the plus minus button near the shutter button. But yes, if you just push that, you just get the ISO on mine now. However, the way I've set up my lever, near the viewfinder, is that if I push that to 2, if I rotate the rear button, I get it cycles through the white balance options, and if I turn the front dial, it alters the ISO. So although it doesn't show it above and below the screen as it used to on, for example, the M1 Mark 1 and Mark 2, you can get the same effect, and it highlights the white balance or ISO changing on either side of the viewfinder as you rotate the dials.
Oh, interesting.
Does that make sense? So I'm moving the lever. So if you move it to 2, you can set that such that if you turn the rear dial, it changes white balance. It cycles through the white balance options, and the front dial, it cycles through ISO options.
Yeah, I mean, that was the original idea of that lever when they first put it onto, I think it was probably M1, or maybe one of the pens. And then they found that everyone was using it for focus mode instead, so they basically pushed it to focus mode by default. But yeah.
All right.
So that's one way around it. Some people also like to use the lever as an alternative on-off switch, don't they? But
yeah.
Yes.
Has anyone worked out a way of overriding the default top ISO level that it'll allow you to go to in auto? Because when I'm shooting wildlife at night, I want to be able to use the higher than ISO 6400 at times. And I'm having to go to that lever and doing it manually.
They've had a lot of feedback on that, and I have a feeling they may have rolled out a firmware update. Worth checking to see whether there's a firmware update, because it's one of the things, along with the stupid disabling the screen from blocking the eye sensor. So on the M5 Mark II, you pull out the screen, the eye sensor stops work, no longer works. That makes perfect sense. On the M5 Mark III, they stopped doing that. They got a load of feedback, and they said, "Oh, we need to, understand users and change the behaviour." So check latest firmware. There may be an update.
Okay, I think I'm running 3.1 at the moment. Something like that.
Joanna, you have a EM1 Mark II, don't you? Mark
Yeah.
II. So
Yeah.
she's talking about the Mark II. I think, Andy, you're talking about the Mark III?
But I think also that because they were getting a lot of this feedback across different cameras, they were looking at changing it for them.
Ah.
It should be quite a simple thing to change, I would have thought.
Yeah.
But.
I think these are great questions, very specific to the camera models. I'm wondering whether these might be better for Michael Gutman when he comes along later. So we can continue. And Andy has a lot of background in reviewing all sorts of things, lenses, and you might want to ask him things about how Olympus shapes up against its rivals and things like that, or we'll just stick with Olympus-specific questions. I'm just trying to make sure we don't get too concentrated on very technical questions about Olympus gear. But then,
okay, well, if it helps, I've got a slightly sort of general question.
Okay.
About lenses, actually. So if you look at the Olympus Pro lenses, and I'm talking particularly about the primes, there's quite a lot of conflict amongst many of the writers in the photo world about whether these very large f1.2 primes on a small micro four thirds sensor really make sense, and whether you'd be better off getting a larger sensor with a more modest f-stop. What's your thoughts on that?
Right, so if you spend all of your time, or a lot of your time, shooting for shallow depth of field, you should get a larger sensor, without a shadow of doubt. It's an easier way of doing it. It's cheaper. So you can put f1.8s or f1.4s on APS-C. You'll do better. And if you, I have a colleague who does a lot of professional portrait stuff, where he'll be shooting an f2.8 zoom wide open. It just makes more sense to use full frame or APS-C if that's your thing, if you're doing shallow depth field portraits. But if you like using your Olympus stuff and you're doing a wide range of things with it, and you want the best lens to do shallow depth of field, those f1.2 primes are great.
Yeah. And which of the f1.2s would you pick out as being particularly noteworthy from a technical optical perspective? I know lenses are used for different things, but I'm just curious from a pure
I haven't used all
perspective.
of them. I haven't used all of them. I like the 25 quite a lot, and I think the 45 is the one that I personally would be most likely to buy if I were going to buy one. But having said that, I'm a little bit of a cheapskate, so I bought Sigma 56 1.4 instead. Because it kind of does the same thing.
Yeah.
You got the slightly longer focal length.
I really like my Pani 42.5.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah, that's a fantastic lens, the Noct. Really, really good. And this is the thing.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
It sort of depends with all these things, what your primary purpose is. No one camera system is good for everything. If you buy a full frame camera system for shallow depth of field, you've got to put up with all the other stuff that comes with it. Like essentially it mostly being larger and heavier and probably more expensive as an overall system. And particularly, all of these fast primes are now getting massive because the current fashion is to go for edge-to-edge sharpness. And if you look at the size of the Panasonic 50mm f1.4 for L mount. That's just incredible. I mean, it's huge. A lot of the Sony really nice f1.4 lenses. So, you know, pick your poison.
Good answer. Yeah.
Pauline Guildford again. Am I on? Pauline
Yes,
Guildford?
hello. Yep.
Yeah. Can I, another question, but I will just say, Andy, how much I enjoy your reviews in Amateur Photographer. I think they're of excellent quality. You obviously know the camera market pretty well. If you were running Olympus strategy, where would you be going next? What do you think they need to do to maintain and improve their competitiveness from where they are right now?
I think they are going down the right line. Slightly controversially, I think the M5 Mark III, thinking about it, going for that lightweighting, when you throw on the 12 to 45 f4, which I've just got review sample of, you suddenly have something which is offering a very distinctly different system in terms of very small, very light, but still robust, still high quality. And the vibe I get from Olympus is that they're going to continue with that. Their lens roadmap looks like it's got an f4 wide-angle zoom coming soon and an f4 telephoto, and these will be pro zooms. And it's essentially a case of saying this camera system needs to have a really clear difference in terms of size and weight against competitors. In a way, its biggest, closest, most difficult competitor is Fuji, because they do a brilliant halfway house, if you like, with APS-C, and they also have brilliant colors, and they make very tactile cameras that everyone loves. Olympus just has to basically show a benefit in terms of size and weight to the average consumer, or to people who care about that.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I think, you know, you can't do much with sensor technology. That's something that people need to get their head around. You're not going to magically develop a new sensor that's going to match an APS-C sensor.
Well, what?
You know, because they're buying their sensors off Sony. Sony are doing the development, and Sony, you've got much, much bigger volumes elsewhere. So they're not necessarily going to throw lots of development time at a 4/3 sensor. What you need to do is look at all the other things the system is good at, the things that Olympus can control, lenses, optics, and just hammer those as best they can.
Panasonic was talking about, well, I don't know about openly, but I was hearing from Panasonic people about organic sensors. Do you have any insight into that?
Organic sensors we've been hearing about for at least 5 years, 6 years. And maybe they'll come, maybe they won't. You know, there's a lot of theoretical stuff in sensor technology that could come. Global shutters would make a big difference. And organic sensors in principle supposedly give an advantage, but no one's ever seen the pictures from them to actually get that as a reality. The bigger advance potentially with global shutter would be to allow the kind of multi-shot strategies that smartphones use, and you could apply them to Micro Four Thirds. That would require a lot of computing power, probably another big processor upgrade. But when you understand how companies like Google, Samsung, Huawei are doing really good stuff with mobile, it's all about getting away from the paradigm of one exposure is your picture and stacking loads and loads and loads of exposures together and doing lots of computational work on them to develop something with higher dynamic range and more detail.
Yeah, I agree absolutely about that. I've got a Huawei P30 and it's staggering how good the JPEGs are a lot of the time. Even if you turn the AI off, it's still doing quite a lot in the background, and it just does HDR when it feels it's necessary and gives a better result than the sort of off the peg Ollie JPEG. I mean, the RAWs are great, but Now, if you want something quick, it's hard to beat, and it'd be lovely if we could that kind of processing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but the problem is with the handphones, those smartphones, if you look at the JPEGs, they look really flat. I think they are over-processing them.
Well, I think this is, it might be true with some, but I don't think that's universally true. I think that some of the stuff that is done can look like that, but Google Pixel's very annoying in terms of how the cameras work, but the processing is amazing. Really lovely color, magical white balance. I mean, always nails it, and able to do high dynamic range that doesn't look unnatural. So yeah, some phones are better than others.
Can I ask, you made a comment a little bit earlier about with telephoto lenses. I guess that's an area I'm interested in. I mean, the new 150-400 looks like too big a beast for me. Like you said, you've got to be willing to carry it. So I'm interested on their roadmap about the next two down, where they've just got two in the sort of 75 to 200-ish range, which just says telephoto zoom lens. Have you heard any more rumors about those?
So my suspicion is one of those is an f4 Pro zoom, which will, or might be f4 to 5.6, but will basically accompany, sit alongside the 12 to 45 f4 as part of a new range, and then the other one may be an entry level successor to the 75 to 300, but who knows? The new lens isn't as big as you think it is. The whatever it is, 150 to 400, but it is a bit of a beast. I think the bigger problem Olympus have got with that is they may have underestimated how difficult it is to make those lenses. Switchable teleconverters are very, very hard to do.
As we're talking about lenses, I just wondered your opinion on these fixed f numbers throughout the zoom range as against something with a variable aperture. I mean, obviously for video photographers, they do like the fixed f number, but for general purpose, landscape, portrait, street, is there actually any benefit to it, please?
No, none at all. There's no benefit to having a variable maximum aperture or a fixed maximum aperture. The main thing with fixed maximum aperture is it's always been considered to be a premium lens. It's become a code, if you like, where people have come to think that a variable maximum aperture zoom is not as good. I had an interesting conversation about this with a company who know a thing or two about lenses, Leica, who said all zooms are necessarily variable maximum aperture unless you limit them. So in fact, it's kind of the other way around. To get the very best out of a lens, usually, it's a little bit of marketing on their part, because when they introduced the L mount, they did a load of f2.8 to 4 lenses rather than constant f2.8 zooms. But their argument is that's just naturally how these things look. And if you get the optics right, there's no difference between variable or fixed. They can equally be really good.
I did actually wonder if they were making it fixed maximum, because let's say f4 against an f2.8 to 4 variable. At the 2.8, perhaps there was a slight softness at the edges, but by keeping it to f4, they could guarantee absolute quality throughout, and that was their selling point.
Well, that's always one of the things that comes in. But then when you look at the Panasonic f2.8 to 4s, Panasonic Leicas, these are great lenses. They're variable aperture. So, it's one of those things where you can spin it either way. You can say we kept it to f4 and therefore we get better quality, or you can say we let you use f2.8 so you'd be able to use more light to take your pictures.
I'm in the latter category.
Yeah.
The 2.8-3.5 50 to 200 4/3 lens. That was a cracking lens.
Yeah.
That was a
I'm still
great
using it.
compromise. Yeah. Great compromise, because the variability in the maximum aperture was quite small.
Yeah, it's a shame that hasn't kind of transposed across.
Yeah.
But I think they thought the 40 to 150 gave most of that. If you put a teleconverter on it, you get kind of the same length and the same aperture. But obviously, taking a teleconverter on and off is a bit of a hassle.
But you could have a teleconverter on the 50 to 200 anyway.
Yeah.
Well, of course. But teleconverters work better on mirrorless. I mean, because the phase detection autofocus on SLRs doesn't like small apertures.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just. Time has flown by. We're now 10 to 7. So we've gone past 40 minutes. Is everyone still happy to continue?
Yeah.
Have we got another question?
So an observation rather than a question. The 100 to 400 Panasonic lens, which I had, did seem to be quite soft at the long end. I don't know if anybody else has had that experience. I've now chopped that in to MPB and got the 300 f4, which seems to be much sharper.
So what I would say there, the 100 to 300, that's f6.7, is it?
No, the 100 to 400 Panasonic Leica to f4.5 to 6.3, I think it was, or 4 to 6.3. Yeah.
So you are at a point with a lens like that where you are going to struggle a bit. No matter how they do the optical design, it's quite extreme. And 6.3 is drifting quite into diffraction territory as well, with micro 4/3. So, yeah, I think a lot of people have seen that lens as being a bit soft, kind of like the 100 to 300 Panasonic, which is really nice at f8, or pretty sharp at f8, but not very good at 5.6. It's just long zooms, long telephotos get soft wide open at their longest end. They just usually do.
There used to be a time, of course, as many of us can remember, when you just couldn't shoot your average lens at full aperture because it was just too soft. So these days we expect lenses to perform at wide open. Yeah.
Put that 100 to 400 in context as well. You've got a hand-holdable 800mm equivalent zoom.
Yeah. I think it also depends. It depends how close your subject is as well. Because at 400, if you're shooting at 400 and you're shooting a small animal or a bird, and it's filling the frame, I think it's perfectly sharp. But if you're trying to shoot, a hornbill-sized animal in trees, half a kilometre away at 400, then it's going to be soft. But then it's going to be soft whatever you're shooting with, I think.
You've got to bear in mind, if you're shooting over long distances, you have got atmospheric haze.
Yeah, absolutely.
You always have issues with focus precision.
Yes, that's the biggest problem I have with that 100 to 400. It's quite often I don't quite nail the focus with it, and it's annoying.
And I think that's just, again, it's a characteristic of those kind of lenses. They're just quite difficult to do. The systems, get them all working together. It might possibly work better on a Panasonic camera in that respect than on an Olympus. I haven't done a comparison.
I don't know whether, is it worth considering back or front focus on the EM1 Mark II, because it uses phase detect. You might be able to optimize the focus by checking that. Do you think that could be a possibility, Andy?
I'm not sure you're allowed to do it with native lenses. I thought you could only do it with SLR lenses.
I've never tried it myself, but I just tried. Okay, another one to look into. By the way, our next guest who I'll announce shortly, he uses the 100 to 400 Panasonic. So you can ask him some questions about that.
The biggest annoyance I found with that, sorry, the biggest annoyance I found with that lens is the fact that the zoom lens went the wrong way.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Flexibility is what you use it for. I mean, I occasionally go snaking, and I really find that, you know, coming back to 200 mil is an advantage. You don't necessarily want to get too close, or you don't want to just to get the snakes.
Yeah.
I mean, the 300 is definitely a better lens and sharper, but the usability cancels the slightly softer image, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Archie, are you asking a question?
Not really, no. Though I actually have both the 100 to 400 Panavica and the 300 f4 Pro Olympus, and my impression is certainly that the Olympus is much sharper, but then that may be partly because I have difficulty at the sort of extreme lengths. I mean, the Olympus, I find, with a 1.4 converter on it, I get good results. With the ×2 converter, I haven't had much luck so far, but I haven't used it as much, admittedly. But then it may be because I'm getting a bit more old and shaky, and so this doesn't help.
Well, the Panasonic obviously has the disadvantage of being a zoom lens as well. So compared to the
Yes,
Olympus,
that's right. Yes,
it's a much more complex optic.
That bit lighter, of course, and which is quite nice when you're just taking it for a walk rather than.
Yeah, indeed. Yes.
Yeah, but bear in mind that one is zoom. It's half the size. It's about half. Well, it's significantly lighter, and it's cheaper. It's
it is. Yes.
Yeah, and it's more versatile, I suppose. I mean, because I shoot mainly on wildlife holidays, I'm kind of limited to what I can take with me. I don't own a 300. I keep looking at it thinking maybe I should buy it at some point, but it's the versatility of having a zoom that can take you from, you know, shooting an elephant to shooting a bird that you know, from a vehicle as well, because a lot of the time I am in a vehicle, so it's not often the case that I can, you know, use fieldcraft to get close to something. That's why I've kind of been reluctant to give up that bag space for the zooms to a prime. Maybe that's the wrong approach, I don't know, but it seems to work for me.
Could I just comment on the 2x converter, because I found it to be optically very good indeed, but the problem is it's f8 using the 300mm lens, and f8 requires a lot of light to be a satisfactory aperture, so I can get good results in good light, but it doesn't work brilliantly in indifferent light.
Yeah, that stands to reason. I actually have talked to Olympus about whether they should make larger aperture telephotos, and said, you know, if you made a 300 f2.8, wouldn't that be brilliant? And they're kind of umming and ahhing about the idea, but they see mobility as being the thing that they do. So, what are you wielding there, Ian?
That's a 300 2.8.
Yeah. Mostly it's not very visible against your background.
There we go.
Camouflage.
I did wonder whether Olympus could sort of look at that PF technology that Nikon seemed to be using in a couple of their primes, because they seem really lightweight compared to a lot of their other primes. I was kind of surprised that Olympus hadn't gone down that route for their prime lenses and brought out some at the, you know, the extreme telephoto end.
It's R&D cost.
Yeah.
Just as simple as that. Those things take a lot of work to make. But yes, the Nikon, I think it's 500.
Yeah.
5.6 is incredible. It's brilliant. Yeah, you'd look at it and think there's no way that can be a 500mm lens. And if Olympus could get their act together and build one, it would be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. I keep thinking I want them to do that. You know. Yeah.
But yeah, it's difficult technology to get right.
But you have to consider that with Nikon, they need to make those lenses because they have the big sensor, and they're forced down that development route, whereas Olympus has a small sensor, so they have small lenses already, and they have the advantage of the small sensor, the cropping, so telephotos are easier to make small, etc. So
yeah, it swings and roundabouts.
Absolutely.
On a similar theme, I've got the 1.4 teleconverter, which I use on my 40 to 150 Pro. I am wondering about going to the ×2, but is it, in the opinion of those that use it, is the ×2 actually on almost any lens just not worth it because of that reduced aperture?
Well, on the 4150, you're still shooting at, what is it, f5.6, which I think is still worthwhile. I think it's, I don't regret having bought it. I think it's a really high quality object optically. But as I say, you need reasonable light with the 300 f4. And of course, there are at the moment only those two lenses it works on. On the 4150, if you've got that lens, it, I suppose, gives you another option rather than buying the 300. But it obviously won't be quite so good. But yeah, I think it's worthwhile.
How do you find the image stabilization with the converter on the 40 to 150?
Pretty good.
Yeah,
I find Olympus image stabilization so brilliant anyway. If one's losing a bit, it's only a tiny bit. So I haven't found that an issue.
Yeah, because it's an interesting
issue. I use exactly that combination and never take it off my 40 to 150.
So,
I noticed that a question. You all use the Lumix lenses as well as the Olympus lenses. Now, on the Lumix lenses, do you use the OIS or do you still use the in-body stabilization?
So for long telephotos, you're usually going to be better off with OIS. For anything that's not a telephoto, use in body. It will be better.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
And of course, sync IS, dual IS.
No, you can't sync the two IS with the Lumix and the Olympus body.
Yeah, sorry, I know that, but I was curious to know whether Andy thinks sync IS is a worthwhile solution for whoever's combination you're going to use, the Olympus version or the
yeah, it demonstrably works. If you put the 12 to 100 f4 on the EM1 Mark III, you're in just this whole implausible level of stabilization.
Yeah.
No one would have conceived a few years ago that you could wander outside and shoot handheld at 4 seconds, and it would just work every time. And across, the wider part of that zoom range, it's easy.
When you think about the wobbling lens element and the moving sensor all working in tandem, you just think that's just never going to work, but it does.
It's magic. It is magic. It's incredible.
Yeah.
I can actually speak to that. And I've got a GX8 with a 14 to 140, and that works in dual stabilization. And I've shot pictures across the Thames at full reach, and it's really quite remarkable that the image quality from that setup is acceptable.
And it's such a shame. I was going to say, it's such a shame that Olympus and Panasonic can't standardize on that.
Indeed.
Yeah, do you think there's any scope of that happening in the future? I doubt it, but
No, it's very, very unlikely. I brought this up with them when they've both first brought out their respective systems, and at the same time, I said to Panasonic and Olympus, "What about aperture? Can you make Panasonic aperture rings work on Olympus cameras?" And they said, "Well, we will look into it," which is code for we're not doing that. So, no, sadly, it looks as though they don't have strong enough element of cooperation to make it work. I'd love to be proved wrong.
Yeah.
But I think you are going to be left with these two incompatible systems.
So lawyers and IP and all the rest of it, isn't it? Really?
Indeed, yeah. Right, can I just say, we're now past 7 o'clock, and I'm just wondering whether we should wrap it up now. Maybe one more question. And I'd also like to ask Andy whether I'm putting you on the spot now, Andy, but maybe you'd like to come back in the future.
Quite possibly, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But I think that sounds like yes, don't you think?
His rubber arm.
Okay, well let's have one more question, and then we'll wrap it up for this evening, because some of you look a bit hungry, I think. So.
No, I'm going to go to bed.
Oh yes, of course, Henry. Yeah, because you're 6,000 miles away. Anyway, we're so honoured to have you with us, and we haven't got any Australians at the moment, do we? So I think they all copped out. So, but it's great to see you, Henry. And of course, Henry's famous for all sorts of things on our forum. He does some fantastic night photography shots. He's done some great galaxies and things like that. So Milky Way, sorry, yeah. So okay,
still learning.
One more question. Who's that?
Andy Kendall. Can I ask then, Andy Westlake? So you've told us all the good things about your EM5 that you love to bits. So what's the one game changer that you want from Olympus to cause you to upgrade?
Well, to be honest, the game changer from Olympus to cause me to upgrade is the M1 Mark III. Very, very tempted by it. Because it does a lot of the things that would make a difference to make it worth having. I liked the M5 Mark III, but I felt that a lot of the things which improves are actually they most of benefit with bigger lenses. And then when you look at EM5 Mark III against EM1 Mark II, EM1 Mark II is a better camera, mostly. It depends on whether you like the form factor, and there's obviously the price issue to take into account. But then when the M1 Mark III came out with insane image stabilization and live ND and handheld high res, I'm looking at all of that thinking that's very, very nice indeed, and it'll work better with the 40-1.
I'm wondering whether Olympus have kind of failed to get across the message that you're giving, because I think a lot of people are still thinking that the Mark III is a very incremental improvement over the Mark II. What do you think?
I think it's going to be very much individual users' judgment call, because for some people they won't actually use a lot of the stuff that's improved, or they may not benefit from it. So I think it's one of those ones where if you just judge on the spec alone, you will not get the full realization of what more you can do with the M1 Mark III, but it might not matter what you can do.
Yeah. Okay then. Well, look, thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and thank you, Andy, for being such a great guest.
For inviting me in.
Well, I'm very pleased that you said yes, and I think everyone else here is too. So
yes, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
that's great.
Okay, thank you.
And hopefully we'll see you again in the not too distant future.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Andy.
Yep.
And
Thank you,
Henry, we'll try and find a slot that's more friendly to your time zone.
No, it's okay. As long as we are on this lockdown, I've got nothing to do. I can sleep late.
Yeah, yes. Okay, guys. So I'm going to end the meeting now, and look out for the next one, which will be on Saturday morning at 11 o'clock. I'll have details soon.
Okay.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Thanks,
Thank
Andy. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks very much, Ian. Cheers.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.